What's going on, guys? It's George coming at you with another video. It's another beautiful day out here in Soho, and for today, guys, I'm actually going to be working on the Datsun. So like I had promised you guys last time, we were going to go ahead and get the car ready and going for a test run. So that's my goal right now. The last video, and if you guys haven't checked out the last video where I actually did the wheelwood brake install for the rear, feel free to check those out. I'll go ahead and leave a link here, or I don't know. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's, I don't know. Initially, I had problems with the suspension in the front end, but I decided to take it just one step further, and I decided to completely rebuild the suspension and the undercarriage for this car. So right now, I'm only working on the front. My bushings in the control arms were pretty much just marshmallows at this point. I'm gonna go ahead and get into the full front suspension rebuild and overhaul for the Datsun 280Z. Alright guys, so I've been working on this for a little while at this point. Oh, look at tripod. But basically, I was able to take out every single part inside of the actual wheel well. So everything except for obviously the cross member. Alright, so I went ahead and got a flashlight, but if you can see, this is just oil and grease and dirt just completely caked on there. Like literally, just you can take this and you can see how much it's built up. Alright guys, so at this point, I mean, I pretty much have taken everything out of this wheel well. All that's left to do is go ahead and start getting a little bit of a cleanup in. There's a lot of grease, oil, just dirt and debris completely caked on, and I pulled out the strut and rotor because it does come as a combination on the old Datsun. The suspension on this old car, it was all pretty much welded together, so you can actually see it right there, and I'll go ahead and give you guys a little bit of a closer look to it. But basically, if I wanted to run coilovers on this, I would have to cut out the old lower portion, which is right down there, and then I would have to weld in the new strut housing. That's how some VCs are made. I know Techno Toy Tuning, they actually make a full replacement kit, so it does include the housing for the rotor and the strut together, and it is adjustable, so it really depends on what option you plan on running. In my case, I'm going to be doing KYB lowering springs on some new stag struts, and that's what we're going to be running for the Datsun. Alright guys, so as you guys can see, like I told you guys, this is the entire strut housings. So what we have to do is we actually have to remove this part right here, which is the top hat. In order to do this though, we have to use some clamps to go ahead and clamp down the spring here, because there is preload set in this spring from factory. So if I just remove that bolt, then this thing is just gonna shoot out. We're gonna lose a bearing. So let me go ahead and clamp this down. That way we can go ahead and get this completely disassembled and painted and hopefully rebuilt. So I'll check back in with you guys in just a sec. And before we get started, I want to show you guys my new gloves that we're going to be using. And if you guys are going to get mad, I don't care. I bought them to use, so we're going to use them. And I know that this isn't what they're used for because they're cutting gloves, but they have a decent amount of grip on them, like my Gorilla Grip gloves. So we're going to be using these to work on the Datsun, because hey, why not? I actually really like them. They're clean. Like I kind of don't want to use them, but honestly, they're not that expensive. They're actually relatively cheap for like a Supreme item. I'm going to use them. They're not just going to sit there. And I'm not going to be doing any cutting right now, but nonetheless, yeah, let's go take apart the strut.
Missing someone with all your own. Missing someone with
Alright guys, so as you guys could tell from the time lapse, by the way, gloves got dirty. Sorry guys. Gonna happen. I'm gonna use them. As you can see, we finally got the spring out from the rest of the strut housing, so that's completely separated now. And I mean, if you saw the force of the actual spring decompressing with me using the tool, that's why you want to use the tool to compress the preload on these, because if you're not using the tool, this spring will shoot out and it'll cause your bearing to basically launch. So like in my case, the bearing's still good, as you can see. But there's a probability that if you don't use the proper tool, the bearing's gonna go flying and you're just gonna completely destroy this thing, and it's not worth it. We have the lower part, which is actually holster for the spring, and then you have the top hat that sits on top of that, and the bearing would sit between the two. And if you guys can actually see, now we have to go ahead and loosen this locking nut here. This is actually what holds the strut all together, and we can go ahead and just peel off these rubber boots. And just so you guys can get an idea of how bad the actual shock was, if I push this in, I don't think it's gonna come back out. Yeah, so it's not going anywhere. That's not what you want. You want your shock to be able to coil back up, because the piston in here is shot, so obviously it's bad. Pulling out the strut, cleaning this up, and we're gonna get it to paint, and I'll show you guys what it looks like once paint is done. Alright guys, so just to give you a heads up, the shock and the locking collar are completely separated now, so this is literally just the hub and the strut casing. So this thing in here, it's pretty much just empty now. I'm gonna go ahead and start cleaning up the rotor housing and the strut housing. That way we can go ahead and get it nice cleaned up. We could get a new coat of paint over it. That way we'll go ahead and get it looking a little bit newer and a lot more polished, and it'll be protective. Alright, so while I was at it, I went ahead and took out the control arm and the rest of the suspension components. That way I could show you guys how dirty they were. And this is the dirty steering arm. I had to go ahead and take everything off, so everything was full of grease, just completely caked on with oil and dirt. I ended up hitting everything with a wire brush and then hitting it with the grinder with the flap wheel. That way we could go ahead and make sure we got all that grime off. And then once everything was done, we wiped everything down and then hitting it with primer. So here I was laying down the primer pretty light onto the steering arms, and then it was onto the tension rods. For the bushings inside of the control arms, they're actually metal bushings with the inner rubber, so I had to cut them out and basically destroy them. But in the end it works out because we're using new polyurethane bushings, so they completely replace it all together. And at this point I just wanted to show you guys how the paint came out all together after I laid down the primer. I ended up doing a metallic gold and then laying down a couple layers of clear on top of it. So all in all, I like the way it turned out. Alright guys, sorry it might be a little bit loud, I have a fan going on in the background. But at this point, they're all cleaned up. As you guys would have seen in the time lapse, there was obviously some bare metal that I finally got exposed. So that's where this is currently standing. So now it is nice, sanded down, completely scraped as much of the debris and dirt I could get off. Now it's been primered, so we're gonna let this dry. We'll come back to it tomorrow and we'll go ahead and get to the rest of the actual painting. That way we can complete this and we can finish putting it all back together. And once the drying is all done, I mean at that point it'll just be a matter of putting it back onto the actual car. Alright guys, so it is the next day. A full 24 hours have already passed at this point. So at this point the paint is fully dry, fully cured. I'm gonna let it sit for an extra day before we start reassembling the entire strut housing and everything. Luckily for you guys though, I took advantage of the time that I had prior to making this video. So I completely dismantled the left side, which is the driver's side, took it apart, completely cleaned it and rebuilt it first. So I figured there's no point in showing you me rebuilding both sides. And you guys can probably tell I was actually doing my thumbnail picture here, but I already have everything pretty much at this point on the right hand side fully rebuilt. So this down here is my rack and pinion, my new tie rod ends, inner tie rods, new boots, new bushings there, a new bearing, so it's all set to go and it is greased up, so it's set right now. All that's left to do is to go ahead and reinstall it. All that's going to be left to do is to go ahead and mount this back up into here. But nonetheless, as you can see here, my control arm is completely recoated in this metallic gold. Same goes with my tension rod. That is going to be the bushings that my sway bar actually mounts to. And this right here is actually a new ball joint. And here I wanted to go ahead and give you guys a closer look at how everything turned out. So this is the blue cobalt paint on the rack and pinion. This is the gold metallic paint on the tie rods. As you can see, this cobalt blue was the same that I used for the strut housing, and the KYB springs are this burgundy-ish color. I really like the color that turned up altogether. I like the reflective pearl that came out in it, and I ended up using a reflective pearl clear coat. So it's one that's made by Duplicolor, and I really like the way that it came out all together. It gave it a nice tint, nice hue. And I mean, on top of that, we're adding a protective layer from any rust to start forming on the strut housing altogether. So all in all, I really like it. Alright guys, so I apologize for the mess that I have down here, but I just wanted to go ahead and show you guys that I have everything fully installed now, so everything's all set. You could see from here, I already have the sway bar fully mounted up, and I have it onto the end links here. The tie rods are all set to go, so I already have them bolted up and have the cotter pin in to prevent them from, falling out, since they are using the castle nut. And the control arms all set, tension rod over there completely set, ball joint completely set. All in all though, it looks like it's set. Obviously I'm gonna end up having to go take the car for an alignment once everything is all done. That way I can make sure that my adjustability on this is all set. All right guys, I swear it's not my fault. It's not my fault. It was ready to go, and now it's not. So the front end is completely done at this point. I came out the next morning and my driver's side was fine. The rears are perfectly fine, but now for whatever reason, the passenger side, which is the right hand side, is now on the floor. So the passenger side, for whatever reason, this thing is completely slumped over. And if I just a little bit of force, this thing is dead. So I didn't know what happened. All right guys, so here, as you guys can probably tell just by looking at the condition, this is the new top hat for the rear end, and this is the one that's messed up. This thing was completely rotted from the inside, and you can tell because when you pull it off, that shouldn't be happening. If you look on the new one, it's all one piece pretty much cast together. That's how this molding is pretty much made. But from having been on there for so long, I mean, I have the car right now on all 4 jack stands, so maybe the weight of the wheels or maybe the weight of its own support was too much. Ended up ripping these through. Pretty much all it does is you get it onto there and you got to line up the hole, and now it's set. So the nut goes up in there. But yeah guys, in order for me to get this video out to you guys on time, I am gonna have to do this on my own time. So I'm gonna do this off camera, which I'd rather make a completely separate video of me rebuilding the rear end suspension and have that be its own video. That's gonna be it for today guys. Unfortunately, we didn't get to get the car on the road so I could show you guys me driving it, but hopefully we can get it by the next one. But nonetheless guys, I hope you guys did enjoy today's video. If you guys did, feel free to go ahead and leave a like down below. Let me know what you guys thought of it today. But aside from that, if you guys did enjoy it, feel free to leave a like. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. It lets me know that you guys are interested in what I'm putting out there. So that's honestly my main goal is to make sure that I'm enjoying what I'm making, but also make sure that you guys are enjoying what I'm making. So hopefully you guys can let me know. Share the video if you guys haven't yet, because we want to grow the community. We want to be able to grow on this channel. I hope you guys did enjoy, and as always, it's another beautiful day out here in Soho, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Later.